Hello friends, welcome back my YouTube channel. If you want to watch the super hit movie The Shadow Strays in full HD, then first of all, give this video a like, and if you are visiting our channel for the first time, then subscribe to this channel. The name of the movie we are going to discuss in today's video is The Shadow Strays. So we will give you information about how and where you will get to watch The Shadow Strays film officially. Apart from this, we will give you a detailed look at the pre-production, post-production, budget, box office collection, and filming of this movie. A detailed review of the movie will also be given in this video, where we will explain the story of this movie in detail. We will also discuss the cast and casting performance of the movie. Apart from this, information about the music department and technical department will also be given. Because of this video is going to be very interesting and entertaining. So, you must watch this video till the end. And if you haven't liked this video yet, then like this video now and subscribe to this channel. So let's start the video. The Shadow Strays is a 2024 Indonesian action crime thriller film written and directed by Timo Tjahjanto. Netflix released it on the 17th of October 2024. The film stars Aurora Ribero as codename 13, a 17-year-old assassin suspended after a botched mission in Japan. During this time, she crosses paths with 11-year-old Manji, who has just lost his mother. The film had its world premiere on the 10th of September 2024 at the 2024 Toronto International Film Festival. Plot codename 13, a 17-year-old trained assassin known as a Shadow, is part of an international organization of assassins. On a mission in Japan, she assassinates her primary target, the leader of a criminal clan. However, 13 is dazed after accidentally killing a bystander and is incapacitated. Umbra, 13's mentor, eliminates the rest of the clan and rescues her. Umbra reprimands 13 for her lapse in focus and puts 13 under suspension for a psych retraining in Jakarta. The handler tasks Umbra herself with undertaking a mission in Cambodia. During suspension, 13 has recurring nightmares of her mother's death and routinely contacts her handler, who instructs her to consume her medication and wait. 13 encounters 11-year-old Manji and his mother, Asti, who live next to 13's safe house. Asti works as an escort for Haga, a human trafficker and owner of the club Moonrose. One night, 13 saw Haga and his men assaulting Manji and his mother, but did not intervene. The following morning, Manji's mother is found dead due to an overdose and police detective Prasetyo warns Manji. Receiving no instructions for over 2 weeks, 13 becomes restless and stops taking the medication prescribed to her. She later befriends Manji, who wishes to avenge his mother. 13 takes Manji to Asti's grave to comfort him. The following day, 13 discovers that Manji has gone missing, and she forces Jeki, a foot soldier for Haga, to take her to Haga, believing Haga had kidnapped Manji. Jeki begrudgingly takes 13 to the Moonrose. Jeki explains that Haga and his twin sister Soraya are a part of a crime syndicate that involves the corrupt Prasetyo, who is also Haga's lover. The syndicate also includes Ariel, a drug lord running as vice governor of Jakarta alongside his father Somitro, an influential criminal kingpin. At the Moonrose, Soraya arranges a drug deal with drug lord Abi Kabil. Jeki requests an audience with Haga to Soraya, presenting 13 as a gift for his boss. 13 learns that Manji had come to the Moonrose the previous night and was kidnapped by Prasetyo and Haga. In Cambodia, Umbra eliminates a number of her masked targets and rendezvous with a fellow Shadow, Troika, who was also assigned the mission, unbeknownst to Umbra. Troika points out that the people Umbra has been killing were also Shadows. Umbra tracks down her main target, Volver, a Shadow. Umbra bests Volver but hesitates in killing her upon learning that Volver is pregnant, which is thought impossible for Shadows. Volver asks Umbra to join her, but Umbra lets her escape. However, Troika finds Volver and kills her. 13 kills Haga, which enrages Soraya, who shoots up the Moonrose and inadvertently draws the police's attention. 13 kills the Moonrose's security team and eventually escapes with Jeki, but the two part ways after the latter refuses to help in 13's mission to recover Manji. Prasetyo desperately hunts down 13 after hearing of Haga's death from Ariel, and Soraya takes shelter with Ariel. Soamitro berates Ariel for needlessly causing chaos by killing Asti, who was pregnant with Ariel's child. In turn, Ariel tortures the captive Manji. Later that night, Persetio and his corrupt police squad stormed Jacky's grandmother's house, but their attack was thwarted by 13. Persetio escapes and leads 13 into a trap at Ariel's mansion. Before she is incapacitated, 13 kills Persetio. Ariel and Soria were determined to torture and kill 13 as revenge, but the two were stopped by Somitro. Somitro intends to use 13 as protection during the Kabil drug deal, as the syndicate has lost many members because of 13. 13 spends the night with Manji, who apologizes for being unable to let go of his mother. After the mission in Cambodia, the handler reprimands Umbra for hesitating in killing Volver, to which Umbra complains that she was not informed that the targets were also shadows. The handler replies by informing Umbra of 13's killing spree and tasking Umbra and Troika to neutralize her to prevent further damage. Before the deal, Ariel tasks 13 to kill Kabil once the exchange has taken place. As the deal happens, Monji, who is in the same car as Soamitro and Jeki, succumbs to his injuries and dies. Realizing this, Jeki alerts 13, who becomes dazed and does not kill Kabil. Jeki takes control of the car he's in and drives it into Kabil's men. In the ensuing chaos, Kabil orders his men to open fire on Ariel's, leading to a gigantic shootout that killed Soamitro, Kabil, and all of Kabil's men. 13 takes advantage of the confusion in the aftermath of the shootout to kill off Ariel's men, and after a prolonged fight, eventually eliminates Ariel. However, 13 is cornered by Soraya, who Jeki swiftly kills. 13 retrieves Manji's body and leaves with Jeki. On the way back from the shootout, Umbra and Troika crash into 13 and Jeki's car, incapacitating the two. The handler tasks Umbra to execute 13, but Umbra hesitates once again. This allows Jeki to overpower her before the handler kills him. 13 escapes her restraints and runs into a nearby building where Troika pursues her. 13 kills Troika just as Umbra arrives. 13 and Umbra duels each other and Umbra wins despite suffering heavy wounds. The handler arrives and orders Umbra to kill 13. Umbra disobeys and attacks the handler. Umbra is fatally shot, which leads to 13 killing the handler. 13 cradles the dying Umbra, and Umbra reveals 13's actual name, Nomi, to 13 as Umbra dies. Returning to Jakarta, 13 buries Manji, but discovers that other shadows are coming after her. The shadows are led by 14, 13's successor, who wants to kill 13. A masked man arrives and kills 2 of the shadows and threatens 14 before she leaves. The masked man reveals himself to be Master Barai, Umbra's revered mentor, who requests that 13 become his mentee. 13 agrees and asks that she be called Nomi from now on. Cast: Aurora Ribero as Tres and Nomi, Hana Malasan as Umbra, Taskya Namya as Soria, Agrapiliang as Haga, Andre Machadi as Ariel, Chu Kinwa as Handler, Naomi Hitineri Christie as Geisha, Mawar Eva de Yonga as Kartors, Adipati Dolkin as Prasetyo, Daniel Ekaputra as Troika, Evi Fozia as Nisari Jamil, Alifikri as Monji, Banan Gautama as Kusno, Danta Ginting as Kabil, Cristo Emanuel as Jeki, Auntie Inda as Heroine Girl, Hiroaki Kato as Kanjiro, Eva Tilia as Volver, Yayan Rohian as Buray. Production. In 2023, Netflix announced its Indonesian original slate, including The Shadow Strays. Tjahjanto previously directed a Netflix original film, The Big Four, a year prior. The production began in July 2023. Release. The Shadow Strays had its world premiere at the 2024 Toronto International Film Festival on the 10th of September 2024 during the Midnight Madness section. Trailer for the film was released in September 2024 ahead of its release on Netflix worldwide on the 17th of October 2024. Reception. Audience viewership. In just 6 days after its release, The Shadow Strays charted in Netflix's global top 10 of non-English film and also ranked the top 10 films in 85 countries, including the United States, Canada, Brazil, France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Spain, Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Indonesia. Critical response. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 89% of 18 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of Patrick Jeske of The Hollywood Reporter praised The Shadow Strays and described it as John Wick, but said, "Make it Indonesian women with Uzis and samurai swords, and more brutal." Johnny Loftus on New York Post's Decider commented that Shadow Strays consists of extended bouts of firearm and fist and swordplay that result in so many satisfyingly gruesome kill shots. An acclaimed Ribero and Malasan's professional skill and personal bond that establishes and eventually pierces the heart at the center of Shadow Strays, as well as recommended to watch the film. Maxence Vincent on Loud and Clear. Reviews approved the film's intense action and violence choreography, describing it as non-stop carnage and admittedly impressive to watch from a visual oral perspective, but is purposefully unenjoyable, and concluded that the film is one of the best and most thrilling action movies of the year, with greatly distinctive choreography compared to other notable independent films in 2024. David Ehrlich of IndieWire criticized the film's maximalist violence as a graceless orgy of death and dismemberment that's easier to appreciate for its spirit than it is to enjoy for its execution, and Timo's vision for the muchness nuance of his film as a double-edged sword. Chris Evangelista wrote for Film and overall gave a balanced evaluation of the film as exciting and exhausting. He praised Timo's delivery of the action and the cinematography as superb style and everything looks extra cool, commented that The Shadow Strays is a movie designed to be cool, and acknowledged the violence's true artistry, as he particularly loved how filthy and bloody the characters get as they engage in scuffles. However, he pointed out that the violence aspect of the film is so constant and unyielding that it made him grow less enamored with the frequent bloody action and a little more weary as the film progresses. On December 6, 2024, it was named the #1 martial arts film of 2024 by the editors of Taekwondo Life magazine. Originality doesn't rank high among the lizard brain pleasures of The Shadow Strays, a pulpy Indonesian action thriller about a rogue assassin that reteams The Night Comes for Us. Director Timo Tjahjanto, with his now regular action choreographer Muhammad Irfan, in collaboration with fellow action director choreographer Trisna Irawan. Action movie buffs know those names, especially now that The Night Comes for Us has succeeded The Raid and its sequel as the latest proof of Indonesian genre cinema's cutting-edge influence. Many film festival reviews of The Shadow Strays have understandably stressed the movie's show-stopping gore and relentless, over-the-top violence, which feels like an extension of the breathless bravura extremity that defined Tjahjanto and Irfan's breakthrough collaboration on The Night Comes for Us. Festival journos also mentioned plot and dialogue, but often in passing, partly because a lot in this movie depends on stock characterizations and hoary melodramatic conventions. Because The Shadow Strays is yet another action movie where a professional killer without a past grows tired of her anonymous life and risks it all to protect somebody she barely knows. So, what matters most in The Shadow Strays? Well, you probably shouldn't outright ignore everything that isn't oriented around brawling and stunt work, since those scenes not only provide an essential dramatic pretext, but also provide some lightly held political context for all this bloodletting. Then again, the story's usually formulaic enough to seem negligible. 13. Aurora Ribero, a 17-year-old killer with a heart of gold, takes on a powerful and well-connected Jakarta criminal organization simply because they threaten her young neighbor Manji, Ali Fikri. Manji's mother Mirasti, Jessica Marlin, worked as a sex worker for the violent pimp Haga, Agra Piliang, an associate of the seedy nightclub owner Ariel, Andri Mashadi, and his politician dad Soumitro, Arswendi Bening Swara. 13 bonds with Manji after Haga kills his mom. She first chases and then gets chased by Haga and then Ariel and his crew. A series of grisly and spectacular confrontations thin the ranks of their respective allies. As you might guess from her lack of a name, Ribero's mysterious avenging angel doesn't have much of a past. The organization that hires her is said to be so secretive that nobody knows who leads or hires them. Human emotions are not only inconvenient for 13, but suppressed with strong medication. 13's inability to regulate her emotions also helps to explain why, when she fights, the world looks and sounds like a cascade of manic action. Ariel's backstory hints at the essential difference between 13's group and his. One thrives on rank, shameless favoritism, while the other prizes loyalty and obedience over everything else. 13's guys are compared with ninjas and samurai early on in the movie. Ariel boasts about his father's promise to make him Jakarta's governor after he himself gets elected. This last plot point will likely raise an eyebrow for anyone who's been following the real-life Indonesian president's efforts, with some help from the Supreme Court, to help one of his sons to run for governor of Jakarta. Tjahjanto had gotten considerably better at using noirish archetypes and genre movie stock characters to sketch out the interstitial drama in his movies since 2016, when he started helming movies without his longtime co-directing partner, Timo. Tjahjanto's direction of action scenes has also notably improved and gotten not only bolder, but more dynamic and polished since Headshot, his first solo feature, and also his first collaboration with Irfan. Tjahjanto and Irfan's collaboration ultimately puts both The Shadow Strays and The Night Comes for Us in their own categories, even if neither movie features characters more memorable than their individual performers. What matters most in both movies can be seen with your eyes closed and covered during their action scenes, whose adrenalized rhythm and action direction inform everything else in the movie. The action scenes in The Shadows Stray bounce and pulse from one point of impact to the next in a flash and then seamlessly switch both the tempo and rhythm of editing and camera movements to match the next set of steps. Tjahjanto's enthusiasm and dedication to conceptual novelty continue to match Irfan's creativity and accomplished work with his stunt teams. Together, they pile on a series of virtuosic, playful, grisly set pieces, which climax with an impressive warehouse shootout that brings to mind John Woo's Hard Boiled. As some other reviewers have noted, Woo and Tjahjanto not only share a half-cynical, half-romantic view of violence, but also likely some of the same influences. What sets them apart as filmmakers isn't where or how much they've swiped, but how well they synthesize their apparent pulp fiction love into something new and cinematic. Tjahjanto scores again with considerable help from Irawan, Irfan, and a generally strong ensemble cast. Plot. After nearly botching a mission, codenamed 13, a prodigal assassin found herself suspended from further duties. The killer teen meets Manji, a young boy who lost his mother to a crime syndicate. When Manji disappeared, 13 turned on setting a path of destruction to find her only friend, even at the cost of defying her mentor and the organization she belongs to, the Shadows. Review. If you haven't watched this movie, then don't read anymore, as I do go into some minor spoilers ahead. The Shadow Strays has been one of my most anticipated action movies of this year, as it's from director Timo Tjahjanto, who helmed The Night Comes for Us, which remains one of the best action movies on Netflix. When I saw the runtime for this was 2 hours and 20 minutes, I thought it was going to be an overlong slog, but it actually flew by with near non-stop carnage and cruelty. It isn't dull for a second and is practically the Terrifier of action movies in terms of violence. We get geysers of blood, and there is almost a terrible beauty to it all, especially the opening 15 minutes, which are arguably the best moments of the film. Reviews have been quite mixed for this movie, and I suppose this isn't a fun or feel-good film, but in the action department it delivers in spades. There are fights, shootouts, decapitations, swords, and explosions, so any action junkie will eat this up. Like The Night Comes for Us, the fights are brutal, with nobody getting stabbed or shot just once, when they can be utterly decimated instead. Aurora Ribero is quite the find as 13, who is an assassin that befriends a boy called Manji. Poor Manji. Corrupt cops kill his mother, and 13 ends up going after them when they take Manji hostage. It really doesn't end well for anyone with a body count surely in the triple digits. 13 is maybe my favorite action movie character of the year, as she manages to be an efficient killer while also being sympathetic, wanting to escape her life as a shadow. There are a few villains throughout, but Ariel, Andrei Machadi, is the most memorable, as he is the son of a corrupt senator while also being a colossal pervert who wears a black mask when inflicting pain on others. The showdown in the warehouse, which I thought was the finale, is jaw-dropping stuff, and watching him get his comeuppance is incredibly satisfying. It's very much open for a sequel. The shadow strays further, and I am there for it as I want to see what happens next for 13. Overall, The Shadow Strays is arguably the year's best action movie, with some incredible action scenes and an awesome lead in Aurora Ribero. The graphic violence may be a bit much for some, but if you're a fan of The Night Comes for Us, then you're gonna love this. Timo Tjahjanto is directing Nobody 2, which is now one of my most anticipated upcoming action movies. An important niche in any film, its character in the sense of like personality. We have visual iconography here, and production design. And I'm sure the Jakarta Tourism Board just to love as a timeout Tjahjanto in a sense that there's more going on. The post-Reddit stinger post, only a credit anyway, sets us up for further adventures with no less than 2 opportunities for a Julius Tell cameo. You'll be just as happy with who shows up instead. But with the director heading stateside, who knows? Precedent hasn't shown that Asian filmmakers are able to retain their essence under the Hollywood system, from the infamous John Woo detour through Rua Tamura's many fumbles, and even the one-hit wonders of the arterier crowd, like Wong Kar-wai and Jong Yamu. But one of the radical changes in the midscape ushered in by streaming is the relaxation of rating systems, and American audiences have always been okay with violence. Here's hoping Baba Dankina and nobody who hits as hard. As Aurora Ribero does here. She's pulling off the bloody kills. Absolutely cringe-inducing stuff. Also with the crazy choreography, generally staying mobile and rolling to cover, and my word, making great use of meat shields. So many dead bodies get blown up by friendly fire, just as so many. That's the essence of this very particular filmmaker, and I'm cautiously optimistic about its future. Regardless, we have Via the Shadow Straya today, which means twice as many gory scenes I can endlessly rewatch. No one. Keeping up with modern action cinema will be surprised to learn that of The Shadow Strays. The new film by Tjahjanto is a masterclass in limb napping, skull pulverizing, blood geysering, totally a word cinema. Tjahjanto wields brutality like a painter does their brush, amazing and delighting his audience with his seemingly limitless ideas for how to reduce nameless goons into puddles of red meat on screen. Willie the Shadow Stsa perhaps never quite becomes the cinematic endurance test that Jagodo's Masterpa did. It nevertheless exists in that odd intersection of action horror that Timo has made his home base. But while anyone turning up for another buffet of blood and bullets will be happily rewarded by A Shadow Strays now on Netflix. What amazes about the new film is less its capacity for carnage, which is again apparently inexhaustible, but its command over quiet, calm, and character. Tjahjanto long ago proved himself incredibly adept at building relentless cinematic roller coasters. What's perhaps most surprising then about A Shadow Strays is that this is a movie that does relent, that forces the roller coaster to a standstill, to instead dwell on sorrow and loss in a way that doesn't distract or detract from the martial arts pandemonium, but instead enriches those kinetic elements. Doza has blood to spill in abundance, but it also has a aching soul and a heart that refuses to stop beating, no matter how often it gets broken. The gauntlet gets dropped right from the jump, with Tjahjanto kicking his epic off with the 20-nut sequence that functions as its own short story. We're told in text about the secret organization known as a Shadows, a clan of highly trained assassins that never fail a mission. No one knows who hires them or what agenda they serve, only that whoever they target ends up dead, no exceptions. In the prologue, we watch a single shadow sneak into a heavily fortified hideout and decimate the guards inside with enough spraying fountains of gore to make you kill Bill blush. And just when you think the set piece has exhausted itself, the operative is compromised after a moment of compassion for an innocent bystander, and a second-day shadow intervenes with a machine gun. That's the kind of intervention in Assassin's Din. Right from the get-go, Tjahjanto undercuts his own malevolent sense of play by prefacing the bloodbath with the main henchman stepping outside to take a call from his young daughter, who wants to know when her dad is coming home. in the grand scheme of the movie, this character objectively does not matter. He exists only to be the point of view character to bring us into the facility and establish the situation and layout before the shadows break in and start repainting the interior with head splatter. He will not survive past the 20-minute mark. And even so, Tjahjanto stops the movie cold to underline that this is a person with a life that is going to evaporate, for reasons they probably don't understand, at the hands of two people who definitely don't know why they're doing it. Even the nameless characters have names in Time Judge in those films, and this film is shot through with the sense of melancholy that so many are going to die with those names unspoken. But the movie proper kicks off when the cool in jump armor comes off, and we discover that the sword-wielding superkiller is a teenaged girl known only as 13. Aurora Ribero, who by all rights should be a movie star after this. Her mentor in Ninja Massacres is Hana Malasan, who is none too pleased that 13 allowed concern for an innocent bystander to distract her from the mission. 13 gets ordered back home, a crummy Jakarta apartment where she works out, takes identity, trauma-dampening pills, and religiously checks and rechecks a secret payphone that will eventually spit out a new target. While she waits, she happens to notice the drama happening next door, where young Mongji Ali Fiki is trying and failing to protect his pregnant, drug-addicted sex worker mother from the nefarious types that populate the desperate corners of the underworld when Mongji himself disappears into that underworld. 13 launches a one-woman crusade against the dealers, the cops who protect them, and the politicians who protect the cops. Tjahjanto has steadily become a master at quickly and efficiently creating cinematic scumbags you cannot wait to see get their bone structures rearranged by a protagonist's fists and feet. And the shadow stress never runs out of avatars to embody the various layers of corruption and vice that choke a city and force people into lives of grubby subservience. Repentant assassin goes on mission to save an innocent. Putting them in conflict with their own employers is about as old a trope as tropes get. Tjahjanto himself has done it now, at least 3 times, with a headshot at The Night Comes For Us, and now with Shadowstar, all playing around with the same basic form. But within that simple framework, Gino keeps folding in different ingredients to produce wildly divergent results. A headshitter plays like a lost Jackie Chan. A hapless badass brawls his way through peril programmer that runs into the buzzsaw of exploitation. Cinema A Night Comes for USA takes its elementally simple narrative and then piles in a dead all via levels of flesh mortification until you have to either laugh at the excess or puke or, I don't know, turn the movie off, I guess. And now we have you, The Shadow Strays, which uses our familiarity with the basics of this setup as an excuse to linger in the margins that other films don't feel the need to explore. We all know that Umbra and the other shadows will eventually return and there will be hell to pay. But in the meantime, Tjahjanto can ruminate on things like the sick camaraderie that exists between his 3 main villains. A trio of grotesque psychopaths who you desperately want to see die, and 3 men who love each other like brothers and weep with their sincere anguish and grief when one of them gets the cut. And why not follow Umbra on her side quest and the moral dilemma she faces there that will complicate her reaction to the news that 13 needs to be taken out? And then there's Jackie Gristo Emanuel, a random thug that 13 presses into service who proves to be wildly untrustworthy and also far more complicated than his function within the story would seem to necessitate. It would be easy to criticize the length of Foth Shadow Strays. But when I'm in the hands of a director this confident, operating at this level of mastery, I want to sit back and let them cook, trusting that all those desperate pieces are going to fit together and be more than the sum of their parts, however long it takes to. Comes into focus, and the Shadow Straya rewards that patience, the novelistic willingness to digress and luxuriate in the details and sprawl, working to turn larger-than-life archetypes into flesh and blood people. By the time the film reaches its apocalyptically, feel almost profound. For all its international scope and overstuffed plotting, At the Shadowstrasse boils down to two women who should love each other, who do love each other, beating one another to bloody pulp at the behest of powers they'll never understand, for motives they'll never even know. The powerful give orders, and we have no choice but to comply, and so the world moves deeper into hell. But the Shadowstrasse holds on to the hope that there might be a way out. All of Timo's apologetic assassin films, in fact, argue that there is a way out of hell. The path may be grueling, but if you have the courage to love and the temerity to persevere in that love, despite all the horrors that this world will wreak upon you, you just might make it through to the other side. It depends on where they strike next, whether they're Noah Cage. Hey, but whatever you call them in whatever country you're from, you'll be dead before you ever see a shadow. Agents of the mysterious group don't discriminate, and they kill only on contract. Morals be damned as a Yakuza Oyabuna and his clan of henchmen discover early on in the Shadow Strays long swords, fragmentary airy nail bombs, and PV kills through the lens of a thermal headset. It all happens with such cold, bloody efficiency. It's surprising when Junior Agent 13 Ribero is scolded by Hana Malasan, her veteran shadow trainer. You were distracted. That's why you failed. Our mission is never easy, but never complex. We're neutralizers, not rescuers, nor negotiators. We strictly kill with her. Ampules of adrenaline and a regimen of pharmaceuticals designed to deaden senses and maintain discipline. 13 is prepared to be her best shadow. But it's not long before she realizes her conscience can't stay fully on mute in Jakarta, Indonesia, when a neighbor kid is harassed and eventually abducted by a gang of ruthless human traffickers in league with a pair of crooked, murderous father-son politicians. 13 feels compelled to stomp numerous criminal thugs and crooked police officers en route to freeing her young friend from his unscrupulous captors. When a psycho gets more satisfaction from slipping on you, his sipper mask, than he does from his torture dungeon, you know shit's up. AIs gouged, skulls crushed between fists, swords run through attackers, and already dead goons being used as shields against automatic weapons fire rate. It's all here. It's all bloody as hell, and it's all soaked in Indonesia's incessant monsoon rain. The shadow stress. It takes a few beats to set up its factions, and the sense of protectiveness that emerges in now. 13, as she dwells on how she came to join up with the shadows and be trained to kill. But when the inevitable showdown finally occurs in between all the bullets flying and cars crashing, is 13's fraught relationship with Umbra, whose own conscience isn't necessarily as vacant as her bosses in the secret society of killers expect. A to stray from a group like the Shadows seems like it's a death sentence. All this group does is kill, and with such terrifying precision that other organizations without the compunction for violence exist in fear of them. So when 13 gets it in her head that maybe gobbling the pills they provide and waiting around for her next murder mission aren't the end all of her existence, you know she's asking for trouble. The Shadow Sitsei is remarkably one-dimensional in that since everybody in this world knows the score, it doesn't consider it necessary to bog us down with backstories and personal conflict. That 13 is Aurora Ribero's character's only known name. Even to her, becomes a significant plot point since it illustrates the bone-dry discipline the Shadow Strays beat into their personnel. At the same time, that's not why you called the boof fascia, consists of extended bolts of firearm and fist and sword play that result in so many satisfyingly gruesome kill shots. You might have to turn the sound down for one of worrying the numbers. All of it is handled with skill behind the camera. A timeout. Tjahjanto isn't afraid to topsy-turvy the perspective as bodies are inverted or fly sideways and blood spatter hits the lens more than the film's nearly constant train. But it's the professional skill and personal bond between Aurora Ribero and Hana Trash Automalin that establishes and eventually pierces the heart at the center of Fash Strays. Tjahjanto has recently been announced as the director of the upcoming sequel to Nobody, which will certainly be a very interesting fit, since the guy loves us ultra-violence with this aspect prevalent in a succession of action vehicles. Featuring cast members made famous scene of the raid, including 2016's Eco Way, Julius. Tells starring a headshot up and 2018's Tjahjanto Iou as Julius Tell. Starring of the Night comes for us. The latter distributed by Netflix, while we wait to see whether Hollywood can temper his Morio proclivities at the Shadow Struzo. Also, for Netflix offers up yet more of this trademark behavior, wrapped up in a more distinctive B, courtesy of its dual narratives of a largely female-driven ninja assassin team and a WeWord member whose downtime leads her into a complicated situation with some local criminal gangs. The Shadows are a group of elite ninja assassins who undertake impossible missions and are notorious for ensuring that the last sound their victims hear is the whistling final breath coming from their half-decapitated heads. One of their upcoming recruits, simply known as 13, gets temporarily incapacitated on her latest mission, and the organization gives her on indefinite leave. But a return to normal life is jarring, and she soon finds herself embroiled in trouble stemming from the corrupt and crime-ridden streets. If you're not a particular fan of the blistering action and relentless brutality of the likes of Faster the Movies and Jag's earlier efforts ahead, and The Night Comes for Us, Dana the Shadow Stress will know to be for you. It's a head-splitting, eye-popping, blood-gushing actioner bursting with extreme violence. The kind of thing that make John Wicker seem family-friendly. If this worked for you, Lena Shadow Strazza is right up there as one of the best extreme action offerings of the year, affording a bounty of superbly choreographed and insanely fast fight sequences, which range from armored ninjas fighting yakas and the snow to a simple 3-on-1 quarter fight in a nightclub, or a painful kitchen sequence with some very hot oil at 144 minutes in length. It's got its work cut out for it to keep the momentum going, but finds plenty of intrigue, courtesy of multiple narratives, that chart both the ongoing work of the Shadows and interconnectedly the plight of their WeWord member, who obviously eventually finds herself a target of her own organization. In some ways, it almost tries to cover it too much ground, but that's hardly a massive criticism when you're pretty invested in the ongoing events throughout. One of the more unusual aspects of the movie is the dominance of female fighters. A largely unknown cast that includes 3 distinctive Indonesian fighting women who are absolutely terrifying in their furious skills. More than convincing in taking down a room full of people with the combination of innovative moves, improvised environmental weapons, and sheer fury. Aurora Ribero takes the lead to Shadow 13, bringing a certain humanity to the unstoppable killing machine role. But it's Hana Malasan, as her unforgiving mentor Umbra, who frequently upstages her in the action department, showing just what unstoppably means. Their back catalogs don't suggest much of note, but hopefully the spectacular action on display here will earn them more prominence going forward. At the very least, a John Wick ballerina, nobody to a cameo would make sense and follow tradition. The Shadow Strazza is exhausting in its adrenaline overload, exhausting in a mostly a good way, but exhausting nonetheless, with its players enduring some serious repeated damage across the duration. Again, if you're familiar with the Ana of the aforementioned movies, you know what to expect. And whilst it covers a lot of ground, it has a bigger picture to paint. Tjahjanto interested in forging his own Indonesian John Wick verse here, world building to allow for spin-offs and even hinting at a familiar face taking the stage for a future film again. Genre fans will be grinning, and considering the efforts made here, the filmmaker deserves the opportunity even. If it's a Netflix franchise, at least it will be one that consistently delivers the goods on a pure action front. Few films from 2024 can stand totally toe-to-toe with this. And if you're a fan of Everything Raid, you should get it watched. Taste up A. If you haven't watched this movie, then don't read anymore, as I do go into some minor spoilers ahead. The Shadow Strays has been one of my most anticipated action movies of this year, as it's from director Tjahjanto, who held The Night Comes for Us, which remains one of the best action movies on Netflix. When I saw the runtime for this was 2 hours and 20 minutes, I thought it was going to be an overlong slog, but it actually flew by with near non-stop carnage and cruelty. It isn't dull for a second and is practically the Terrifier of action. movies in terms of violence. We get geysers of blood, and there is almost a terrible beauty to it all, especially the opening 15 minutes, which are arguably the best moments of the film. Reviews have been quite mixed for this movie, and I suppose this isn't a fun or feel-good film, but in the action department, it delivers in spades. There are fights, shootouts, decapitations, swords, and explosions. So any action junk, he will eat this up, like the night comes for us. The fights are brutal, with nobody getting stabbed or shot just once when they can be utterly decimated instead. Aurora Ribero is quite defined as 13, who is an assassin that befriends a boy called Mongi. Poor. Mongi. Corrupt cops kill his mother, and 13 ends up going after them when they take Mongi hostage. It really doesn't end well for anyone with a body, surely in the triple digits. 13 is maybe my favorite action movie character of the year, as she manages to be an efficient killer while also being sympathetic, wanting to escape her life as a shadow. There are a few villains throughout, but Ariel Andre Machadi is the most memorable, as he is the son of a corrupt senator while also being a colossal pervert who wears a black mask when inflicting pain on others. The showdown in the warehouse, which I thought was the finale, is jaw-dropping stuff, and watching him get his comeuppance is incredibly satisfying. It's very much open for a sequel. The Shadow strays further, and I am there for it as I want to see what happens next for 13. Overall, The Shadow Strays is arguably the year's best action movie, with some incredible action scenes and an awesome lead in Aurora Ribero. The graphic violence may be a bit much for some, but if you're a fan of The Night Comes for Us, then you're going to love this. Time. Tjahjanto is directing Nobody 2, which is now one of my most anticipated upcoming action movies. Somewhere deep in the woods of Japan, a Yakuza leader tries to abuse a geisha when something lurking in the shadows suddenly pops up and brings him to his demise in less time than it took him to take off his robe. With this scene alone, you can imagine that the Indonesian action film of The Shadow Strays is a spectacle from start to finish. I've never seen the film of The Raid, but when I think of Indonesian cinema, that's the first film that pops into my head. And because of that, I already know that they stand a class apart when it comes to action films. Funny how my introduction to Indonesian films has been through horror. But I'm happy to have finally moved on and actually found something that's worth your time. Before you go any further into this review, I want to emphasize that this film is tremendously gory and not for the faint of heart. It's a highly stylized thriller with barely any breaks, and over 2 hours at that, soft bloodshed is not your thing. Then I'd tell you to turn around right now because you're barely going to be able to sit through even 5 minutes of this film. With that disclaimer out of the way at The Shadow, Strays tells the story of 13, a young assassin who's told to take a break after she messes up on her first mission and is sent back to Jakarta. 13 meets a young boy named Mongi there, and without really forming a bond, when his mother is killed, 13 takes it upon herself to protect the boy and keep him safe from any harm, even if that means facing the most immoral syndicates in the city. Overkill is the only word I can use for director timeout. Tjahjanto's style. It's a shame, really, that I haven't watched any of the man's previous work to make comparisons to, because this film uses stylization that's beyond explanation. I'm not even a big fan of action myself, but just seeing how certain action sequences are choreographed had my jaw on the floor, and some of the kills had me turning away. This is clearly a stylistic choice, though, lingering when the audience expects the camera to move on. Of course, it's not new recently. A lot of horror films have done the same thing. I recently watched it up in a violent nature, and still I could easily say this film is one of the goriest I've ever seen. I suppose it's the difference in genre that really makes it stand out, even as John Wick looks unworthy in comparison. Hey, now if you're wondering why a film with such a simple story requires a 2.5-hour runtime, then I'll be happy to let you know it's for prolonged action sequences that move at the pace of the KTX. So in no way will you feel the runtime while the action is taking place. However, there's something I'd like to point out that kind of messes with the otherwise fast pace of the movie. While the film is generally focused on 13's story, this is the perfect kind of movie that can be turned into a franchise. So for the world building, we're introduced to some other plot lines that completely steal away from the main plot, like a fly that's bothering you while you're trying to eat a good meal. If you're looking for emotional investment, then find a different bank, because this one's only doing kill counts. I mean, sure, the whole point of the film is for 13 to find her place in this terrifying world. I guess that's where it lost me a little bit. I mean, it's not a new story, and we don't really delve into it at all, despite the 2.5-hour runtime. So there's a sort of emotional disconnect between us as an audience and the character who is making some seriously insane life choices based on said emotions. However, this is my little critique as an emotional girl who likes to cry every chance she gets. On the other hand, if you just care for the gore and the violence and all of the many creative ways someone can be killed, then by all means, this is the movie for you. Aurora Ribero stars as the stoic 13, and she does a fantastic job in keeping the character distant, a little bit brazen, or a lot. And of course, the action sequences are insane. Hana is alongside her as Umbra, the strict instructor who gets sidelined in the middle of the film and then reunites with her pupil right at the end. I think she's underutilized for sure. There could have been more about this sisterhood and how these emotionless women are trained to keep everything at bay to essentially become monsters. But I guess that's what sequels and prequels are for. For the rest of the cast, they're barely in the film, especially the villains. Yes, there are many, and I really don't appreciate having to watch a scene of abuse because in this day and age, it feels incredibly regressive and unnecessary. Anyway, Aurora is the star of this film, and one can very clearly see that while watching it do a yes, there's a post-credit scene in the shadow strays. Though just seeing the director's title card show up before the scene makes it seem almost disrespectful to be calling it a post-credit scene. I'm guessing this means time out. Tjahjanto plans on making this a massive franchise, an Indonesian action franchise that takes the world by storm, just like did back in the day. I know it wasn't that long ago, but hey, I was still basically a child, so it's fine. Anyway, if you're looking for something that's action-packed from start to finish and will blow your mind with its gore and violence, then this is the film for your weekend watch list. If that's not your thing, I'd say stray away from the shadow strays. I'm sure we can find something more attuned to your tastes. I'd give you the shadow strays a 3 out of 5 stars. I'd have given it another 0.5 had it been a little more tightly packed, but here we are. The Shadow Strays is the latest ultra-violent crime martial arts epic from writer-director Tjahjanto. Like of the Night comes for USA 2018, and the more comedic, The Big 4A, 2022. It was produced by Netflix Indonesia, so you can probably watch it right now, wherever you are. Important subtitle tip. At least on my Roku, you have to click Other to find the full subtitle menu. If you want to choose English instead of English CC, like 2016, it takes place in a world of elite assassins trade, at least in some cases, from childhood. These ones are known as shadows, and they're more of a global mercenary agency, like militarized ninjas. We begin in a snowy Yakuza fortress in Japan, where 17-year-old Agent 13, the Incredibler, or Ribero, rises up out of an armor collection to decapitate a sleazy boss. She kills so many guys, almost eliminates the entire clan, but gets distracted by collateral damage and has to be rescued by her mentor-instructor, Umbra, Hana Malasan, the Train of Death. Afterwards, Umbra gets called off to some show in Cambodia, so 13 is sent alone to an apartment in Jakarta. The Shadows have some pretty good resources. On missions, they wear ninja armor with night vision goggles. They carry easy-to-use nail bombs and adrenaline shots for first aid. But 13's home life is humble. She just does push-ups and goes to a certain payphone in an abandoned parking garage to call into the organization. In emergencies, it can also dispense a gun. She doesn't hear from Umbra for weeks, just hears a pre-recorded message reminding her to take her pills. Yeah, these are a different kind of red pills than Nina the Matrix. They seem to discourage individuality and questioning, and maybe suppress the traumatic dreams. she has about the death of her mother. But then, I don't know, maybe she thinks it's good to remember her mother at all. So she decides to stop taking them, and soon she's questioning what she's been told is her purpose as a shadow. We're neutralizers, not rescuers or negotiators. We simply kill. She decides to try out being a rescuer. She notices a Jessica Marla, a pregnant prostitute who lives down the hall getting hustled and slapped by her pimpaga, Agripillian Awanir's nightmares and daydreams, and some other. The next day, she sees Osti's body being taken away. She didn't even really know the lady, but worries about her orphaned son, Manji, Ali Free, 24 hours with Gasper. I like how he tries to talk tough at first, claiming he's better off without having to take care of a junkie mom, but then he breaks down. The next day, she can't find Mangji, but does find a flunky named Jackie Gristo Emmanuel, the Big Four, searching the apartment for anything that can connect the murder to Haga. So she forces Jackie to drive her to his boss at the Monroe's nightclub. He makes up a story to get her in, but she drops it pretty quick, and it becomes one ferocious teen versus a criminal empire. Haga and his unhinged twin sister Sora Taskya Namya, the verge of death, are excellent scumbag villains, as is their partner Pris Adapulkin, the clerics, a sadistic bastard cop, who we also see break down into tears at the death of his junkie pimp rapist friend. But above them is Ariel Andre Machadi, the Big Four. The ambitious son of a powerful gubernatorial candidate, he's a handsome dude who wears nice modern suits with skinny pants, passes for a respectable citizen, thinks he'll rule Jakarta one day. Also is a freaky weirdo who has a filthy dungeon below his mansion and puts on a leather-type mask whenever he wants to get violent. The mask looks so weird on him. He really seems like a villain out of a manga. And I love that this could work with just the old equalizer Bete using her special set of skills to help a neighbor in trouble. But it's bigger and better than that. Once I've settled in for that, it cuts to Umbra's mission in a forest in Cambodia. She gets back up from another agent, a giant named Troka, Daniel Kaputra. May the devil take you. Who's introduced lifting a guy by the head and squeezing so hard, and I pops out like the best moment. Tina Friday the 13th, 3D. Look out for that guy. Umbra gets some very clear opportunities to like her student back at home, break with her programming, and do something better with her life. Also, she gets dressed down by her boss, just like 13 did by her. But now all the pieces are on the board for a bigger conflict. The Shadows have learned about 13 killing like 100 people without authorization in her war with dealers, traffickers, corrupt cops, and politicians. So now the Shadows are on their way to clean up the mess. I've seen reviews complaining about the length, and I respect their right to be completely wrong. There are great 90-minute movies. But this is like a hard boil or off-ace. Or of course, of the night comes for us, where much of its power comes from doing everything to the limit. In today's economy of shrinking action budgets, it's so thrilling when we get a movie with such scope and production value, including varied locations, action in nightclubs, apartments, garages, alleys, forests, in rain and snow with all kinds of colors, and lighting schemes. Tjahjanto with cinematographer Butter Ago, impression, and editor Dinda Amanda Gand stir together a masterful mix of techniques. And imagery, whirling cameras, scenes lit by flares or strobe lights, fights, seen through security cameras or night vision, a broken bar. The film, it is a rocket boosts from careful controlled movements to wild and propulsive ones and then back to static shots without sacrificing visual clarity. Tjahjanto is an undeniable action master at this point, and the fights choreographed by Mohammad Rafan, who did stunts in the movies and choreographed the other Jagino classics, overflow with those little beats and details I love. One small example is when she's fighting a man in a plastic mask in a kitchen. The burners of the oven get turned on. She melts his mask with the flame. When he attacks her again, she grabs a wok from the oven, splashes hot water onto him. Then she weaponizes the wok in several ways, swinging it like a mallet, hitting with the edge, hooking it over his head, using it as a shield, throwing it. At other times, she puts a sword in the ground and drags a guy crotch first into it, swings around a stripper pole to kick a guy, pulls a broken sword out of herself like she's unshathing it. A guy does sword moves with a baseball bat, but she snaps it and uses the splintered stub as precisely as a blade. Number 13. Respects the baby assassin. A rule that if she's fighting someone bigger than her, she somersaults around, runs up walls, and slides between their legs. Her posture sometimes reminds me of Tony Jam Yangu, and she also shares his preference for Converse All-Stars, which I love. In my experience, they're not durable or supportive, so it seems like they'd be bad for urban martial arts, but they're such a classic look. Guns are sometimes used both as projectile and blunt weapons, but on many swords, knives, machetes, rocket launchers, bottles, a syringe, a screwdriver, a table, a hook, a receipt spike. There's lots of fire and or motorcycle riding, car ramming, and nothing is skimped on. Being a Tjahjanto film, it's extremely gruesome. A couple top-shelf decapitations, some chopped-off fingers, an amazing part where she's brought to a scary boss and seems to be doomed until spoiler. She bites off his ear, slams his head against pavement, and crushes his eyeballs into his brain with her thumbs. The appeal is not just gore, though. Yes, there's a clear homage to a famous bloodletting fro-owned wolf in Cuba comic and the movies, but also I think to Luke Skywalker throwing down his wing, lightsabering a Return of the Jedi. I believe that action for action's suck is legitimate, but most of my favorites are the ones that have some poetry and melodrama imbuing their violence with themes and emotions that resonate with me. And that's always been the case with Tjahjanto's movies, including this one. We may not have ever been an elite assassin who begins to gain morals, but we probably have experienced some amount of questioning of worldview, or even an indoctrination we grew up with. I noticed a generational theme going on here. Umbra shows signs of having a conscience like 13 does. She stops herself from flipping through photos of a target with his kid, but she enforces the status quo. This is how the world works. But she's more liberal than the previous generation. You think I'm being harsh? It's nothing compared to what I experienced. She had to call her teacher master instead of instructor and snaps at 13 for getting that wrong. So we've got that optimistic idea that each generation might rethink the standards of the previous one and do things a little better. Progress, man. We all want that to be true. For the younger people to rid off of all this bigotry the old people saddled us with. I hope it's true. But Ariel represents that other thing we also see in the world today, like with the tiki torches, who make us worry that the arc of the moral universe might not really bend towards justice. Ariel is no better than his corrupt dad. Definitely crazier. And less disciplined. Also a weird pervert. True to life. I love the weight put on 13's name. Right near the beginning, she tells Umbra, "I'm not just a number, I have a name," and almost tells her what it is, but Umbra stops her. After spending a day with Mongji, he calls her sis, then suddenly realizes he doesn't know her name, but besides, he just wants to call her sis anyway. When she's forcing Jackie to drive her to his boss, he asks her name, and she doesn't answer. So he continues to call her Missy, according to the English subtitles, until he makes up the name Sorry as a cover name while infiltrating the place. So when she later tells him her name is 13, it's very meaningful that he asks her whether or not that's what she wants to be called. Maybe even as meaningful as when Umbra finally hears and acknowledges her given name. The first words in the movie are the text in a cruel and unforgiving world exists a clandestine outfit, a broken bar. So the most touching thing in the movie is that 13 and Jackie are above all forgiving of each other. She found him going through Mongji's apartment to cover up the murder, nodding off on stolen drugs. She has no idea about him taking care of his sick grandmother. As far as she knows, he's a piece of fiplingt. And to him, she's an enemy of his gang, going up against him. At the very least, going to get him in a bunch of trouble. But he chooses to help her get in, lies for her, and after being forced to go along with his boss, turns again to help her, endangering himself greatly. In a cruel and unforgiving world, those two don't judge each other. It's beautiful. Indonesia has long had a strong film industry that has gotten more and more global exposure thanks to streaming and the success of Gareth Evans' 2011 film, The Raid. In the years since, we have seen many impressive action and horror films from Southeast Asia, many of them by director Timo Tjahjanto. Whether as a solo writer, director, or part of the duo known as the Mo Brothers, Tjahjanto is known for his complex action choreography and brutally violent gore. Today sees the release of the director's latest movie, the epica, The Shadow Strays. Take clocking in at 2.5 hours at the Shadow Straza is big in every way, from the numerous action set pieces across Asia. The film is an impressive feast for genre fans, as Tjahjanto raises the bar on how creative he can kill thugs and mercenaries. With a lot of time to fill, Add a Shadow Stria works more than it doesn't, but still suffers from an imbalance in the non-action sequences. Combining the excess of John Woo's heyday with buckets of blood usually reserved for horror films at the Shadow Stirs looks and feels like a big-budget studio action movie, albeit one with very over-the-top histrionic exposition, opening with a sequence set in Japan. We are introduced to the concept of Shadow's assassin's drain for anonymity during a brutal massacre of a Yakuza clan. A shout-out, Rainini codenamed 13 Aurora Ribero is chastised by her teacher Hana Malasan after she loses focus when a civilian is caught in her crossfire, relegated to the bench where she must continue taking emotion-regulating medication. 13 returns home to Jakarta and stumbles across a young boy named Mongji Sebastian Sero, whose mother is killed by a gang, leaving him an orphan, feeling parallels to her own past. 13 takes Mongji under her wing when he is kidnapped by the criminals who killed his mother. 13 seeks to rescue him and takes down every person in her path. A lot is going on. Enna, the Shadow Strays, much of which does not make much sense. There is an attempt by Tjahjanto to make the Shadows a blend of super soldiers and righteous warriors. But we spend so little time seeing them on mission that it feels unnecessary. The bulk of the story centers on 13 using her training to exact merciless vengeance upon the criminals who kidnap Mongi, and that is more than enough for this movie to make sense. Equally, the villains spend a lot of time monologuing about their dastardly plans, which include rape, murder, and political ambition. The crooked cops and gangsters are working together to rule Jakarta, but 13 and Mongi are in their way. There is a subplot halfway through of the Shadow Strasse that tries to shift the focus and give 13 a detour, but it mostly adds another substantial action sequence to the already overlong running time, because the Shadow Stetsa is deliberately melodramatic. The exposition scenes border and comical, which some viewers may find detracts from the pacing of the film, delaying us from getting to more bone-crushing violence. While some elements of Thoth the Shadow Stirs feel a bit outdated, namely the fact that a female assassin shocks some of the male characters, most of it is grisly, over-the-top fun. From the first scene, the CGI blood pours in abundance with every weapon you can think of being used, from guns, knives, swords, and household objects. When weapons don't do it, teeth and fingers rip at flesh as the bodies hit the floor. Aurora Ribero and Hana Malasan are excellent as they blend the mentor-me relationship with an understated familial bond that never slides into anything formulaic. The majority of the weakness in this movie falls to the villains. Every bad gay in this movie is a stereotype from a Jean-Claude Van Damme or Steven Seagal movie. Yes, it is fun to watch them die, but when they try to wax philosophical, it just drags down the pacing of the entire film. Tjahjanto has proven his style, relies on going up to the line and sometimes crossing it spectacularly. As a director, he has given us some truly scary moments, notably in of the ABCs of Detha and both a VHS-2A and a VH-94,A, but his work in law, May the Devil Take You, and as part of the Mo Brothers with the Headshot. Tjahjanto feels both like an inspiration for the trend of Faj Wick-inspired films. That is likely why Tjahjanto recently wrapped production, and Nobody 2A with Boba Denker, which will hopefully boast some of the signature violence. Tjahjanto was a filmmaker who feels destined for Hollywood greatness if he had come in 20 years ago when studios were more willing standpoint. Even if the script suffers from cliché dialogue and overwrought dramatics, The Shadow Strasse is brutal, bloody, and badass as an action film with over an hour of running time easily wasted. I found myself almost fast-forwarding through dialogue to get back to the action, something I am sure most audiences will be tempted to do. You can easily skip to the fights and still understand most of what is going on, which is the biggest problem with the Shadow Star as a movie. Netflix is notorious for having films that overstay their welcome a bit too much. Still, this movie is so good in the action department that you will not want to risk missing a single roundhouse kick or decapitation dot. The Shadow Star is one of the better action movies to come out this year, and will have your jaw repeatedly dropping as each sequence outdoes the previous one. An unrepentant maximalist whose genre movies are defined by the mad gluttony of someone born to leave it all on screen. Indonesian filmmaker Tjahjanto is nothing if not easy to root for. There's something indivisibly pure and precious about a guy who doesn't know the meaning of the words too much, whose horror stuff goes so far beyond the pale that it makes a delicious meal out of its own. Bad taste, and whose orgastic action Fair Headshot, which Tjahjanto and Timo Stembo co-directed as the Mo brothers, is so hyper-violent that it makes you wonder if it's possible to run out of CGI blood, that much nigh beautiful as it might be. In theory, AA is also something of a double-edged sword, and Tjahjanto still isn't precise enough to use it without disfiguring his own vision in the process. Which is to say that like The Night Comes for Us before it, Tjahjanto's latest and most ambitious symphony of stabbings is another exhausting monument to its own excess, a graceless orgy of death and dismemberment that's easier to appreciate for its spirit than it is to enjoy for its executions. Tedious, numbing, and always falling just short of the hard-boiled cool that it's too derivative to reach for itself. The Shadow Strays is the work of a filmmaker whose enthusiasm continues to outstrip his skill. And while that giddy imbalance has always been the basic lifeblood of genre cinema, the endless silhouette cast by Giacchino's sprawling Netflix epic makes it easier than ever to lose sight of the fun we're supposed to be having with it. But Add the Shadow Strays begins as only a movie so devoted to its Mothersmore is less approach ever could, with both a wall of expository text and a cryptic quote credited to Medusa that adds nothing to the action that follows. The gist is that our cruel and unforgiving world has given rise to an ultra-secret clan of mercenaries who will kill anyone for the right price regardless of morals. They're known as Shadows. They wear all black tactical gear, which is a bit too chunky to look as cool as it should. And they will, you're all the way up without thinking twice. Well, a massa of them will. Anyway, it's possible that the shadow known as 13, played by a blank but believably dangerous Aurora Ribero, might be a bit too soft-hearted for the life of darkness that's been assigned to her. As we see during the frenzied prologue in which she's tasked with eliminating a very cartoonish Yakuza clan deep within the sea of trees. It's all fun and games for the first little while. 13 decapitates heads so fast they whistle off their bodies, drags a henchman's balls directly into the blade of a sword that's sticking out of the ground, and makes sure to reacquaint us with Tjahjanto's signature bit of high-speed slaughter, repeatedly stabbing someone in the chest at close range. But everything changes on a dime when 13 accidentally murders the geisha she was trying to save from being raped by the clan's Oyaban. A mistake that leaves our heroine so out of sorts that her sole loose mentor Hana Malasan as Umbra has to pick up the pieces. Our mission is never easy, but never complex. Umbra tells her shaken pupil during her post-fight performance report, the cold-hearted killer, effectively describing every action movie that Tjahjanto has ever made. Sidelined by her organization until she can prove that she doesn't care about collateral damage. Shadows are given a strict regimen of pills to stifle their motions. 13 is left to wait things out in a squal Jakarta high-rise broken bar, where she immediately develops an emotional attachment to a teenage boy named Mongji, who soon finds himself kidnapped by the same big-time local bad guys who murdered his drug-addicted mother. A little tenderness can be a dangerous thing to have in a world so tough. And it isn't long before 13A, scarred by a childhood loss of her own is bleeding a trail straight to the heart of the Indonesian underworld, much to the chagrin of her employer. The words paid time off truly mean nothing to some people. That premise might seem to set up a rather straightforward movie, but Tjahjanto's indulgent streak forbids him from taking the shortest path to his story's logical conclusion, an approach befitting a movie that has no logic or conclusion. Similar to The Night Comes for Us, The Shadow Strays has a lot more plot than it needs, and far too few reasons for us to care about any of it. I don't sweat the details, but it hinges on the overlaps between an upcoming election and several $1 million in stolen drugs. Preferring to emphasize color over clarity, Tjahjanto litters this vacuous chunk of pulp fiction with larger-than-L life characters who are meant to create their own internal mythology, including Haga the pimp, his trigger-happy girlfriend, Sora, the crooked cop Proteopause, a hedgeman with a heart of gold, and a large adult Fail who likes to wear as gear while he tortures people for sport. And not a single one of these human sketches comes anywhere close to elaborating on their archetype, which doesn't stop Tjahjanto from treating their meshwork of internal conflicts with the seriousness of a Russian novel. The Shadow Strays doesn't suffer from a lack of action, but the long and deeply uninvolving passages that surround them create a constant sense of restlessness. All the same that Tjahjanto interrupts the film's lowest ebb with an extended detour about Tumbra's emerging conscience suggests a profound overestimation of the viewer's involvement in the story, as do a variety of other scenes that only seem to exist so that The Shadow Strays can lay the groundwork for a potential franchise that its world building is currently in no position to support. The closing title card is immediately followed by one of the busier post-Reddit scenes you'll ever see. And yet, for all of the stuff that this movie hopes to sell you on, it almost completely overlooks what little emotional depth it seems to dredge up along the way. Intrigued by the patriarchal implications of a secret organization that strips women of their instincts and agency, even as it turns them into unstoppable killing machines. Tjahjanto isn't, at least not yet. Maybe in the sequel. And so we're left to wait for the fight scenes, which are frequently awesome but seldom exciting. Typical of the director's work, this combat is too fast to meaningfully engage with the environment around it, which explains why the last hour's worth of carnage is set in a series of empty spaces. The camera always feels like it's a few crucial frames ahead or behind of where it should be for maximum impact. And the grappling style of Pen Cakshalat has been suffused into the very fabric of compositions that tumble upside down and back to their feet again on a gimbal. Which is never as satisfying to watch as it sounds on paper. There's no meaningful sense of escalation to the staging, and the performer's skill and physical sacrifice is often diminished by geysers of digital blood along with other CGI affectations that distract from the dynamism at hand. The beat where a bad guy's face is shoved into the fakest-looking burner fire you've ever seen is typical of a film where the effort is rarely worth the reward. While a top-down shot elsewhere in the same sequence allows us to savor the raw technical aptitude that The Shadow Strays so often loses in its eagerness to be as sick as possible. But of course, that eagerness is also Tjahjanto's greatest strength, and where he succeeds is in the sheer brutality of his fight scenes. Much as my eyes glazed over during this film's extended set pieces, their interminability isn't without purpose. Tjahjanto puts his audience through such a bruising onslaught of violence that we can't help but appreciate how beaten down and exhausted his characters must feel. A trick of attrition that allows their raw feelings to bleed right through the screen. The intensity of 13's emotions, her desperation to escape the moral oblivion of her organization, is so viscerally communicated by the combat scenes that it further obviates the need for all of the lead and filler that surrounds them. All that muchness and nothing to show for it. Tjahjanto wants so desperately to make the most badass action movie you've ever seen, and that's a beautiful goal to have. I suspect the rewards would speak for themselves if he simply set his sights on making a good one first. And that's how you decapitate somebody. Time out Tjahjanto, as far as I'm concerned, deserves an honorary Oscar as a part of completely revitalizing the action movie genre. The Shadow Strays hopefully continues a long partnership with Netflix, which has already produced one of the best films on the streamer. Tjahjanto probably pitched Netflix with "It's the Night Comes for Us," but a whole epic drama about the operator character. And after you all watch this, they probably just threw gobs of blood-soaked money at him. A thrilling opening introduces us to the Shadows, a secret organization of assassins built upon high-stakes missions. The mission is a success, sort of Teacher Umbra Hana Malasan scolds her latest Prototype 13 Aurora Ribero for hesitating hitting during the battle because of what Tumber calls collateral damage. While Lumber goes off on another mission, 13 is sent back to Jakarta for psychological recovery. After a few weeks, 13 gets stir-crazy waiting for her latest mission and makes friends with local boy Mongji Ali, free taking care of his sad sack drug-addicted mother. That mother finds herself enmeshed in drug activity run by the powerful Ariel Andre Mashadi, which puts Mongji into harms while a broken bar. Not a good idea when a pissed-off, bloodthirsty assassin is just hanging around. Tjahjanto goes for a similar approach to the night, comes for us in story, simple but powerful. The issue here is that only works if the movie stays brisk and keeps moving. This one goes for a quick chapter for a levels of epic, really blowing out the runtime, hoping the action will escalate along with the drama. However, the story never quite gels the way IO wants it to. Splitting up Umbra and 13 hampers the emotional drama, trapping Umbra in what essentially becomes sequel filler that may or may not come. It's an extra 30-45 minutes that would have been better spent having Umbra try to teach 13 during her fraud state after the opening mission, making the big finale clash means something much more personal and rewarding. The Shadow Strays should have been smart enough to know to get in and out and complete the mission as efficiently as possible. But I guess sometimes more bodies have to hit the floor, and hit those floors they do many times in many different body parts. Jagan is a master at this point at crafting a stellar action sequence, and the Shadow Strays is filled with one great one after another. The fight frequency is also pretty high for a long film, meaning just as we catch our breath, someone looked at 13 the wrong way, and we're back in it. Timo's great skill is finding new ways to bloody someone up, like say dragging a leg across a broken car window, or an insane check calling card for how to slice someone open with the sword. Aurora Ribero and Hana Malasan, and show that a great bloody action drama isn't just the realm of men either. The pair of them owe down anyone who gets in their way with improvised electricity and pizzazz. The movie is building to the teacher-student battle, of course, and thankfully that visceral battle and flows in that bloody ballet way only the great martial artists can pull off like these two. 140 minutes of mayhem could be exhausting in most films. But in The Shadow Strays, there's an energy in the air that propels the blood off the screen and through your body, demanding you put down your phone and watch a broken bar. Or else there's a cap or two that demands more Shadow Strays to come. There's enough meat on that bone and a great cameo to boot that would make me happily jump into another demonic dance. With Timo and his crazy band of loyal Indonesian action stars, for all that dumb money Netflix usually throws around, this one is a good investment getting more eyes on some of the best action players in the business working today. Swords, guns, and blood capsules in tow. After seeing Timeout Judge and Toss of the Shadow Strays, I'm slightly baffled at some critics who qualified the film as badass. Sure, the action is a hyperkinetic with plenty of satisfying creative kills performed by its protagonist, 13 Aurora Ribero. However, how its violence is visually treated and even choreographed seems so far away from the badass catharsis of filmmakers like Soy or the mind-blowing physical action comedy of Yugo Sakamoto and Kenshik Sonomura. Or rather, the violence here depicted in this 145-minute-long non-stop action, A Rise of Punishing. It begins right at the top of the movie, where 13 and Umbra Hana Malasan kill an entire Yakuza criminal line in the Japanese mountains. A head is immediately chopped off, and Tjahjanto lingers with the body before it falls off the ground. A hand is cut and used as a physical weapon, which then culminates in 13 using a body as a shield and gets violently shot before she grabs another body and stabs it to oblivion as blood fills the lens. As cool as some may think it is, and it's undoubtedly shot with tons of verve, One such image has an impressive backward tilt that reverses the image. There's no world in which this kind of violence rewards or even satisfies our protagonist. It's all punishment for her, whether literal or even figurative. However, one must understand that this is a feature and not a bug. But it's hard to qualify of the Shadow Strissa as badass when Tjahjanto posits 13 as a pack character born and raised out of violence. Fragmented flashbacks give us clues about her past until it's fully revealed near its conclusion. All she seemingly knows is killing, and she grows impatient when forced to lay low in Jakarta, take her prescribed pills, and await further instructions. During that time, she observes the death of Misrati Jessica Marla, a sex worker whose unfortunate addiction to drugs led her straight to an overdose. As a result, her son Mji Ali Fik is left alone to fend for himself. The two meet at a restaurant and 13 grows a fond liking for him. It's the only moment in the entire film where we see a glimmers of humanity inside an agent whose human qualities were erased from the moment she adopted the name 13. The next day, and predictably so, Banji is kidnapped by club owner Haga Agrail, and it doesn't take long for 13 to figure out what's going on, and she immediately plots to exact the revenge on the people who want to hurt Mangi, which include only Haga alongside political figures Ariel and Mashadi and his father. So Amitro Arwendi banning Sarah. The rest of the film is non-stop carnage, which is admittedly impressive to watch from a visual oral perspective, but is purposefully unenjoyable. I'd even say that if anyone tells you the film is badass, they're likely a sicko who enjoys watching depraved, often perverse violence treated in the nastiest possible way. Each cut of various body parts in Tjahjanto has time to explore the whole body in 145 minutes, which he does is not only explicitly violent, but felt deep within our bones. Unlike many action movies that aestheticize violence and make it as pleasurable as possible for the viewer, Tjahjanto's approach is often sickening, and he holds nothing back. There isn't the scene in which the viewer doesn't feel as physically exhausted as our protagonist, who has to fight off a fresh horde of enemies every time she kills someone, introduced as a primary antagonist, and dies 2 scenes later in the most vicious way possible. This creates a new enemy who learns of a figure's death, and in turn goes after 13. Rinse and repeat until it's a thrilling conclusion, which finally gives purpose to 13's quest for redemption, freed from the shackles of violence. Though it seems far more complex than this, as its sand credit scene teases another carnage-heavy sequel, while many will describe the punishing physical toll of violence on 13. What's most interesting is how Tjahjanto operates on an entirely psychologically active level through endless amounts of blood released from all body parts and conduits humans might have never thought existed until this film. 13 knows full well that if she doesn't change course, this sustained level of extreme violence will bring her to the ultimate punishment far sooner than later, especially when it is revealed that her own team is going after her for having broken her instructions and meddling in affairs she had no business even likely poking in. But there's something Inji's innocent, almost pure naturia that she slowly connects with. For the first time since joining the shadowy organization she's a part of, there's a longing hope for a better life, and saving me may hold the key to leading her to it. But of course, since this film is all about punishment, things never go the way 13 envisions, leading to some of the cruelest character decisions of Tjahjanto's genre filmmaking career. Some people might have thought the director crossed the line, and perhaps if such a moment were exploitatively captured, such as in Ben Kate Brabassa, the greatest of all time, I would have agreed. But Jaga was so empathetic and protective of his protagonist that we ultimately care about her plight of breaking away from punishment and attaining a rewarding, fulfilling life, even if the path to freedom is so far sending her further into the depths of hell. Representing this emotional journey can prove complex, but the Ribero is in complete control here, magnifying the camera and conveying pain in subtly devastating ways. It doesn't take long for us to sympathize with her. She's not an irredeemable killing machine, as some protagonists in action films do tend to be, but someone who sadly does not know any better than the life she unfortunately did not choose. Tjahjanto constantly lingers on her face, whether through extreme close-ups and action sequences or constantly evolving language that represents her pain and anguish. When the situation goes in an even worse direction than it initially did, it compels us to watch the movie until the very end, even if its concluding section stretches the runtime to nearly interminable heights. At some point, the violence, while always furiously shot, choreographed, and edited in a way that reinvents the genre, not as an anchor of emotion, but as constant, bludgeoning pain, becomes less impactful and frequently mind-numbing. Perhaps that was the point, but I appreciated how Tjahjanto draws an unsubtle commentary on punishment through violence, rather than the senseless finale that only seems to revel in gratuitous action. However, this is a minimal issue of a movie that, whether for better or worse, kicks incredible amounts of adrenaline into our system. Is it badass? I'd beg to differ, especially in how unpleasantly treated its violence is. But it's undoubtedly one of the best and most thrilling action movies of the year, with choreography vastly distinct from some of the most compelling genre works in the independent sphere released in 2024. Assassin's Nice Days. Sochinga Twilight of the Warriors W&A and Time Jaj and Tasa, the Shadow Stresso in that specific order, their brain may melt permanently. Whether that's good or not is up to you to decide and discover on your own. Time out. Jojo doesn't kill easily. The Indonesian filmmaker behind two of the past decade's most gloriously brattle action films. A 2016's A Head Shut Up and 2018's Of the Night Comes for USAA prefers his violence over the top, his weapons deviously devised, and his on-screen body count so ridiculously high that even John Wick would blanch. All of which makes the director's latest exercise in Mortal Kombat so over-the-top glorious, even if its supersized sensibilities might exhaust Albert, the most diehard of audiences. Ending with an affectionately bloody homage to Tashi Yuja's 1973 genre touch, Sonia, Lady Snowbloodda, and closing with a cod that tropes in one of Indonesia's biggest action stars to create a marvel. Like's cinematic universe at a Shadowsta is an all-you-can-beat buffet of action movie excess. The plot is being there, killed, that a young mercenary, Senum 13 Aurora Ribero, working for a secretive society of assassins, decides to help a teenage neighbor in Jakarta, leading to all sorts of chaos. But any basic narrative threads are just excuses for Tjahjanto to stage a series of bone-crunching set pieces. Finding new and inventively cruel ways to shuffle henchmen off this mortal coil, the director levels up his trademark use of the Silat style of martial arts, overkilling the concept of overkill. In Tjahjanto's opinion, it is not enough to stab someone, but to keep stabbing them with an increasing speed and intensity until the knife practically rips through the screen. Ribero is impressive as the steel-nerved hero, but she is also matched beating for beating by Hana Malasan, who plays a mentor sent in by the shared employer to clean up 13's mess. As the two women clash in the film's final moments, Tjahjanto executes a truly glorious extravaganza of choreographed carnage. As impressive as it is overwhelming, the true shame Faye. The shadow strays, though, is that it demands to be seen with a sold-out crowd. Of fellow blood and guts enthusiasts say an impossibility at the moment, given that it's releasing straight to Netflix. But moviegoers who missed its handful of theatrical screenings at last month's Toronto International Film Festival shouldn't feel too bad. They'll get their big screen fix of Tjahjanto soon enough, as the director is currently filming the sequel to the Baba Dangkirk action flick, and nobody prepare yourselves. No one is doing it like... Timeout. Tjahjanto, Indonesian filmmaker, creates movies that make you say, hell yeah, and his latest digital blood-drenched opus, The Shadow Strays, seems designed to both excite and exhaust the viewer. It's loaded with killer, ultra-violent action scenes that just keep going and going and going to the point where everything starts to get bogged down. That's not to say the film isn't a hell of a lot of fun. Action fans will get what they want here. Still, The Shadow Strays is a step down from Tjahjanto's fantastic The Night Comes for Us. Perhaps because the director seems to be trying to create an entire franchise full of world building, instead of just focusing on the moment. The Night Comes for Us one of the best action movies ever made, was perfectly self-contained and focused. In sharp contrast, The Shadow Strays keeps introducing new elements that feel like they're designed to be expanded on. Hell, even after the movie ends, there's an unusually long cod that seems to be promising multiple sequels. It's all just a little too sprawling for my tastes. Don't get me wrong, I vibed with the blood and guts The Shadow Strays had to offer. But as the movie stretched on for 143 bone-crunching minutes, I frequently found myself wishing Tjahjanto would rein it in just a smidge. Perhaps such a wish is silly when watching a Time-Out Tjahjanto movie, as films are all about excess after all. They're loaded with big action, big violence, and big melodrama. But I also think if the filmmaker had made his latest just a little more focused and a little more precise, it would be an action masterpiece. Instead, we'll just have to settle for something that's pretty entertaining but doesn't quite come together. They set in a world of grungy warehouses, neon-lit nightclubs, rundown apartment buildings, and secret layers. The Shadow Strays begins with a bloody massacre at a hideaway tucked deep in the snowy darkness of Japan's Sea of Trees. A group of well-dressed yakugoons find themselves slaughtered by an Ina-like assassin decked out at tactical gear. Right away, a Tjahjanto is unleashing waves of gruesome close combat violence where nameless characters meet a gory death. In the midst of all this carnage, an innocent bystander gets killed, and this gives the assassin pause. So much so that another assassin has to come in and finish the job. In the midst of all this, we're presented with the twist that both of these killers are women. One soon-to-be-dead character even proclaims shocked a woman. When one of the assassin's masks is removed, there's the older Caldra Umbra Hana Malasan, who had to swoop in and clean up the mess. And then there's 13, Aurora Ribero, the killer who dared pause to reflect on the death of an innocent. 13 is still a teenager, and even though she's clearly skilled at chopping people into pieces, she's still learning. We're told that these two women are part of a shadowy organization hired to dispense death in the darkness. But 13's hesitation has made here persona non grata, and while Lumbra is sent off on another murderous mission, 13 is banished to an apartment Tina in a Jakarta to await further instructions. Every morning there, she wakes up, takes some pills that are meant to suppress her more human impulses, does a lot of push-ups, and looks generally miserable. It's not a fun life. Then one day, 13 decides to stop taking those mood-altering pills and begins to change. Ashay soon gloms onto her neighbor Mongji Olifiki, a kid whose mother was just murdered. 13 and Mongji become awkward, unlikely friends after sharing a meal. And then almost immediately Mongji is abducted by drug dealers. What's a highly skilled teenage assassin who just stopped taking her mood pills to do, but set out on a violent rescue mission? I can't help but think that if the Shadow Array stuck with its simple story about an assassin saving a kid, it might work better. Instead, a Tjahjanto is just getting started. 13's quest to save Mongji leads her deeper into an underworld where she pushes up against not just slimy drug dealers, but also a corrupt cop Atapen political intrigue. Surrounding an upcoming election and a full-blown drugged-up psycho named Ariella Andri Mashadi, who likes to don a leather fetish mask before he kills people. And just to make things extra messy, 13's mentor Umbra gets pulled into the mix as well. All of this is dialed up to 11, or I guess I should say 13. And while the story is needlessly convoluted, 8 Jagger delivers on the action. The camera tracks all of the fast and furious movement with superb style, and everything looks extra cool indeed. If nothing else, The Shadow Strays is a movie designed to be cool. It's also a movie designed to be violent, and that violence is so constant and unyielding that it begins to grow numbing. As the film continued on, I found myself growing less enamored with the frequent bloody action and a little more weary. At some point, it's all too much. Still, there's true artistry on display here, and I particularly loved how filthy and bloody the characters get as they engage in scuffles. A final lengthy fight scene renders the combatants so covered in gore and grime that you'll be seized with the urge to toss them a bar of soap and spray them down with the hose. After the night comes for us, I wanted more action movie mayhem from a timeout Tjahjanto. And yet now that he's delivered it with the shadow strays, I find myself curiously let down. Perhaps the glorious highs of the night comes for us were so extreme that I expected something even better this time around, and recreating that euphoria was impossible. Instead, the shadow strays feels more like a step back than a step forward. By the time the mid-credit coda arrived, I wanted less, not more. Still, those craving copious amounts of carnage will find plenty to dig here. But I'd be more interested in seeing it Jag create something new and different next, instead of returning to the sprawling world of fascia shadow strays. In other worlds, Willie, I find myself frequently wanting to revisit The Night Comes for Us. I don't think I'll be giving the shadow strays a second watch anytime soon. When you break down a story, there's always a component of good versus evil. If you're looking for an action flick, the best of this genre takes the conceptor and maximizes it. We see this a lot in films like I, John Wick, and it goes back all the way to the great samurai films of the past and even the westerns. While watching these movies, you have one thing on your mind, and that is the need to see someone kick ass and take names. Add the shadow. Struja does that with the punk style, as we watch a girl fight for what's right when a child across from her apartment is kidnapped, sending her down the spiral staircase to the criminal underworld. The Shadow stereo Midnight Madness of this year and received great reaction. So many of my colleagues said I had to see it as soon as possible. The film isn't perfect, as it is a bit long, but it may require a second watch. But for what it is, the film is a damn fun time as we follow our lead 13, played amazingly by Aurora Ribero, who journeys into the sea, underbelly of the underworld, trying to do one good deed after being discharged from her assassin group. What starts as a journey for answers becomes a brutal and relentless bloodbath that is so much fun to experience. The Shadow. Stress. It takes the approach of maximalism when it comes to how it frames its action, as it throws everything at the wall and constructs complex and wildly entertaining scenes of carnage. Some action films take the approach of minimalism by giving you a good amount of action, but they focus more on the characters and the plot they are trying to spin. While the film takes great effort in constructing the characters and the story that surrounds them, it also goes above with the action and builds an experience that is so much fun to watch. Every action scene feels like it could be in its own movie. Together, they become a blend of card and so exhilarating to experience. The standout moment is the nightclub sequence, which is batshit insane, with some impact moments you can feel and some gore components that push the rating as far as it can go. Those familiar with The Rectal or A Timeout, Jago's previous work would not be surprised, as this type of spectacle is notably similar to Bow to the Night Comes for USA 2018, A Big Four, a 2022. The lead performance from Ribero keeps this film on the right track, as you always feel invested in her journey and inner struggles. With an action epic like this, it's easy to spend more time focused on the action set pieces and forget to create a good narrative to catapult your audience into the world. The film makes sure to put enough eggs in every basket to keep it feeling exhilarating and emotionally driven. The use of vibrant colors to paint every scene is a fantastic touch that makes it much more enjoyable to be in this world. The decision to keep all the action in focus instead of using a shaky cam or editing it in a way that cuts the impact moments was also a welcomed addition, as so many projects decide to take the easy and cheap road to frame their action moments. The camera also follows the action and lets you float with the moments, and that adds to the immersion quite well. The Shadow Striza is the kind of film you should check out if you love films that focus on making the most bone-breaking experience for its audience, while also treating them to a good story. If you like a Dither or John Wick, you will have a fantastic time with this one. An optimal way to watch it would be with a good television and sound setup, or even with some good AirPods or headphones, as not. They paid attention to the details in the score and the sound mixing. The best type of action film takes a maximalist approach by giving you everything you want and then some dot. The Shadow Stress delivers that experience for those willing to give it the chance, as it is a fantastic time and is martial arts cinema at its most maximalist. A. Since the release of Gareth Dean's Suda in 2011, Indonesia has found itself within the spotlight for genre cinema, a game that's finally been made all the more exciting thanks to filmmakers like Joe Kawanuir, Kyo Stambal, and Timo Tjahjanto. In this film, directed by the latter, one can only expect that after the night comes for USA and the big for that, they would be in store for some of the most violent action scenes that they'll see in a very long time. And he doesn't ever let down with the Shadow Strays. He only shows himself to be one among the best contemporary action filmmakers, A1 belonging to a class with Chad Stahelski, John Woo, or the Wachowskis. Well, the Shadow Stress starts. We're seeing a mission taking place in Japan, in which a young assassin codenamed 13 Aurora Ribero takes down a gang of Yakuza members until everything goes wrong. Thus, her mentor, Hana Malasan, takes initiative after it all went awry, eventually leaving her to lay low in the slums of Jakarta soon after. But 13 soon has a chance encounter, which may very well revitalize her own need to be on the move, a move which defies her mentor and organization's orders so as to stand for what she believes is right. Time out. Tjahjanto lifts from many espionage thrillers with this premise in mind. But what comes for Thina the Shadow Stsa after its incredibly violent opening never lets down on the bloodshed. It becomes clear from the way that the Shadow Stsa starts that this film's own world building has been immensely plotted out. From the nature of these missions to the people running things behind the scenes, time out. Tjahjanto's own ambitions take this action ride to great heights. Tjahjanto doesn't waste time on shallow exposition, instead opting to get it all out of the way as quickly as he can, but it also gives us a better understanding of our own heroes who she works with, and a very personal struggle that she deals with inside. That's also where we get the perfect introduction to 13A as a shadow. We understand that she's supposed to be a perfect and unseen assassin, one who only takes orders from higher up. Yet even after rigorous training, she's still prone to many mistakes, which her own mentor Umbra must clean up after. Because we're not seeing a perfectly slick action hero by way of characters like John Wick or Sarah Connor, we find ourselves more grounded with the world that 13 inhabits, and ultimately how someone like her is left to fend for herself, and what exactly she stands for. It also helps that her, Aurora Ribero, brings an energy to her role almost comparable to that of Linda Hamilton or Uma Thurman, Ola Terminator, or Aquila at that. As we witness what's at stake in The Shadow Strays, we find ourselves in store for something much bigger than what we imagined. Everything seems so cruel around 13, but she finds something to stand by after befriending a young boy whose mother was killed at the hands of an Indonesian crime syndicate. After forming a connection with him, it builds itself from time, Judo's understanding of what makes a memorable action hero. For even the ones who stand out in our memories are not stick-killing machines. They're still human beings with their own agenda. Part of me thought back to films like Hila Famnica by Luc Besson in how they understand the formations of great female action heroes, in that they always have a human side to them beyond the image that they're expected to push forward. Noting the fact that the Shadow Strasse starts with a very extravagant action set piece in Japan, it only gets more exciting as we realize this is just a warm-up. Blood and guts spilled from the first action scene all the way into the last. But Tjahjanto ensures that we will only want more of that, and so he gives. Yet the environments where they're set within even finds a way to play a factor into making this all look so great. Whether it be a scene set in a nightclub or in a warehouse, there's always something in the background for 13 to utilize to her advantage. And even her clumsiness leaves us rooting for her as many bad guys are taken out one by one. But even in knowing how such characters are often expected to work on behalf of one organization, 13 makes it clear that she's not someone who exists by way of a code. Unlike her mentor Umbra, which only leads to some very emotionally charged moments between the two of them, but it's also felt within their own action scenes. They're at conflict with each other over how they've been left to live their lives because of what's expected of them. Like any other great action movie character, whether they be a hero or villain, Tjahjanto knows that there's always a human element to them, ensuring that they make a lasting impression once the film ends. It also makes that last fight scene between Aurora Ribero and Hana Malasan a very wholly memorable one too. Compared to The Night Comes for USA or The Big Four, it feels like time-old Tjahjanto has created one whole world that's waiting to be explored. Dina the Shadow strays if it comes to that point where he chooses to make a sequel. Even the film's ending teases that I'll be there. It maintains such a kinetic energy through its entire duration, through brilliantly choreographed action, down to maintaining a very human core, to its leads beneath the image we have of our idealized action heroes within such a setting. But considering the ambitious heights that Tjahjanto is showing off in The Shadow Strays, we can only find ourselves craving more of this world. The Shadow Strays is a new Netflix movie from genre filmmaker Tjahjanto. This one is a real hybrid with action, thriller, and crime as the main genre. Also, martial arts play a huge role as both you'll see from the impressive action and fight scenes. This is a movie from Indonesia, just like the iconic of The Raid. And yes, this movie Anna actually lived with that comparison, probably due to stunt choreographers Muhammad Rafan and Chisan Ran, longtime collaborators of Timo, who have also worked in all The Raid. It is unfortunately too long, with a runtime of nearly 2.5 hours, mostly due to the many long and impressive action sequences. Continue reading our The Shadow Strasse movie review below. Find it on Netflix from October 17th, 2024. As revealed just before the opening scene, this movie is about the syndicate of assassins known as the Shadows. As the title indicated, this movie ends up being about those who stray from this group as well, and you don't know to leave a syndicate of assassins. Just look out a Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The only way out of such a group is to die. Or to be exact, either you die on the job or they put a hit out on you when you try to leave. In the case of Foth Shadow Strays, the latter is the case. However, before we get that far, we follow an assassin known as 13. She's only 17 years old, but clearly has years of experience already on a mission in Japan. Things become much messier than were intended, and she's suspended for the time being. This offers free time to notice things around her in the normal world. Of course, this world also has a lot of crime, and when she meets the 11-year-old Mongi, she becomes protective of him, especially as criminals murder his mother. Then Mongi disappears, and it looks like her colleagues are somehow involved. So now she needs to go against them to help the Guo, have certainly been spoiled in recent years. Between the John Wick franchise and an occasional burst of excitement out of nowhere with films like Inobodia or Monkey Man, one gets the sense that there are still people fighting to give us quality action. But of course, there's the unfortunate reality that most major films being marketed as blockbuster action flicks simply don't have the juice. Now, I have no intention of naming names of any kind, but it does feel essential to point out that for the most part, general action fare feels like a barren wasteland. Lucky for us, Indonesian filmmaker Tjahjanto saw the desperate plea for help as a call to action, and with his latest film, At the Shadow Strays, celebrating its world premiere at the 2024 Toronto International Film Festival, it feels like he is taking on a challenge. It's been 6 years since his last full-blown action bonanza At the Night Comes for Us, and it appears as if he saw the last half-decade of action filmmaking and decided to overload the senses as a reminder of how good we can still have it. We shouldn't settle for filmmakers cutting around action when there are those who do all they can to avoid cutting altogether. Even more, this film serves as a reminder that action films don't need to settle for hollow scripts. Too often do people try and reduce genre fare to being less than. What's most exciting about The Shadow Strizza is that even putting action aside, there's plenty to latch on to that makes for an enriching and exciting experience. Over the course of the film, its title kept popping into my head. I began thinking about what people think of when they think of the word a shadow. There's the most likely answer. It's what happens when light shines against something. There's the more fantastical answer, a sort of darkness that looms over light and goodness. And then there's the metaphorical answer, something that follows us around regardless of whether or not we want it to. Everything by that logic has a shadow attached to it. And that's most certainly true for basically all the principal characters of Fat Shadow. Strays. And aside from just being a flat-out badass title to have, one begins to question what it really means. As Tjahjanto introduces us to more of the characters, the crux of this film and the beauty of its title begins to take shape. It's in the extravagant opening sequence that we meet Agent 13, Aurora Ribero. It feels more apt to say we just witness her awesome capabilities. Covered in head-to-toe armor and weaponry, she is part of an elite group of cold-blooded assassins known only as fright bestowed upon her by a random henchman, explaining why his boss and their entire organization needs to be worried. Following the brutal mayhem that ensues, one thing leads to another before Agent Umbra is sent to Jakarta to await further instructions while Lumbra, her instructor, goes on another mission. While this is very much a film about Agent 13 and her eventual quest for vengeance, Tjahjanto certainly loves his stories, revolving around parallel journeys, clashing into one another in brutal fashion, in what feels like one of the few missteps so far the shadow strays. We are occasionally pulled away to see what Tumbra is dealing with internally. These sequences feel a bit more like cutaways expanding the world of the film rather than actual parallel narratives. To be clear, these scenes following Umbra serve a definite purpose, and they look damn great from an action film-making perspective. But I would argue that these scenes invariably convey the same message as the rest of the film follows 13's journey, but to a slightly lesser effect. Now, it's also important to note that despite feeling this way, the climax of Fat Shadow Stresa still strikes you like a cannonball. At no point during this film will you feel bored. It is a non-stop assault on the senses, with Tjahjanto setting up his fights everywhere, from a small kitchen to an empty warehouse, or from a nightclub to the innards of a cargo plane. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. It cannot be overstated how cleverly his fights are structured. Beyond relying on exciting camera movement and blood splatter galore, the wide array of checks insert common item to later be used as a deadly weapon. Here commands the audience to remain rapt at attention with each scene. If Tjahjanto shows his fighters as individuals who are willing and able to use anything around them as part of their arsenal, it instantly conditions his audience to keep an eye out for anything and everything. So, as the film comes barreling to a close, we once again return to the idea of a shadow. What happens when something we thought would be attached to us forever strays away? When a child sees the body of his mother taken away in a bag by police. When a student is no longer able to abide by the immoral pledges her master forced her to take. When a son who has long been under the thumb of his domineering father decides to take matters into his own hands and set off a catastrophic chain of events. In many ways, at the Shadowstrasse feels like a film about parenthood and the eventual need to relinquish control. When the shadow strays from what it's connected to, fate will take over. We must eventually let it stray, if that's what's called for. To hold on to it with all our might clearly causes a much larger set of issues. It's not easy to let go, but it does feel necessary at times. To let go of something can often make us stronger this year that will be stronger, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as the all-time legend Agent 13. Thanks for watching.